Up next, we have Michaela De La Micho. She grew up in a multicultural Afro-Indigenous, Mexican, and first-generation Italian household in Los Angeles, occupied Tongva territory. She now lives in San Diego, occupied Kauai and Kumaya territory with her family and friends. After studying under teachers of Western Tantra, traditional Mexican ceremony, and womb healing in the Ma'at tradition, Michaela has committed herself to education and community care. She creates non-judgmental, benefit-optimized, and healing spaces for people looking to delve into the mush womb consciousness. Michaela?
Thank you so much.
You go, goddess.
Thanks. Hasheho. Grand Rising, everybody. It's a beautiful day. The sun is high today. Spirits are very high today. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I would like to, in this moment, call forward my ancestors. And all this work is always divinely guided by their choices and their ways of healing, and I'm blessed to be on the stage with you today. I would like to offer you a song. I learned this song. It's a Lakota song. It's called Dakota Lullaby. And it's a song that I sing to my son. It's a song for children, actually. And I learned this song to help put his mind at ease going into sleep. And I actually carry this song in my ceremonies, and it really is a standing testament to how much the care of children and young people is how we can approach the people that are going through their journeys and experiences. Thank you. And that means, thank you. That means be still, child. Tomorrow will be a beautiful day. And so I'd like to present to you some of my scientific findings and some cultural histories around incorporating entheogens within the birth world and really reestablishing a relationship between entheogenic plants and, as Jyotima was talking about, this evolutionary process that Mother Nature is asking us to embark on. And without the stage of the birth scene, of pregnancy, postpartum, and breastfeeding, can we even discuss evolution at all? Let me see if I can click this button here. Here we go. Legal disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a person of lived experience and a lot of interest in this subject. And of course, I do not condone illegal activity depending on where you live. But in this coming times of potential legal changes, education is absolutely needed. I see a giant void and a big gap when it comes to how to integrate entheogens with this motherhood experience, and they are so needed within the motherhood space. Birthing people face harsh criticisms for their decision making from their families, their doctors, their child care professionals, the education system around them, other mothers even. And so the thoughtful use of these medicines for their healing qualities, many of these people that I come to know are just walking in the ways that are intuitively right for them. And often we make the mistake of forcing mothers to make decisions against their intuition. And so I'm simply here to advocate for the return of our medicines in this space, because I've seen such incredible value be brought back into women's lives and birthing people's lives and families' lives and the lives of their children by leaning back into these medicines. You're welcome. The number one question I get asked, are entheogens safe in pregnancy? And so what I would like to do is do a comparison of not only the toxicity of the entheogens that we know and love so much, but the plant medicines already utilized within obstetrics today. These entheogenic earth medicines that we love so much, cannabis, mescaline-producing cacti like peyote and San Pedro, psilocybin-containing fungus like Psilocybin cubensis, LSD, which is a derivative of a fungus called ergot, and DMT-containing medicines like ayahuasca and 5-MeO-DMT. I have experience using these medicines throughout the entire pregnancy, breastfeeding, and postpartum experience, and also have been gifted the opportunity to share space with my own son, who's 2 now, in some of these very medicines. Toxicity in the natural world. So this is the primary fear factor that a lot of women and families, they want to know the answer of. Is this a toxic agent? Am I going to harm my child? Are we going to have mutanogeneses that show, fetal mortality? Is my child going to die? Skeletal variations, malformations. Are there going to be reproductive effects of these medicines if I do ingest them during pregnancy? Will there be carcinogenic effects, neurotoxicities? Will something change in their development of their motor functions, and then inheritable mutations of phenotype? Is my child going to be born with a rare skin condition? Does it increase the likelihood of mutations that are quote unquote unwanted? And what I've found with a lot of these medicines is they are among the safest medicines. And so I will show that in later slides, how they really stack up against some of these other really commonly used chemicals within the birth scene. I'd like to talk about 3. The poppy, this is the opium poppy, belladonna, and then ergot. So poppy, the opium poppy is synthesized to produce morphine, which is a commonly used medicine in the epidural. Epidurals are, it's a general anesthetic essentially, which morphine is then added to for its pain relieving properties and also its stabilization properties with the medicines that go through the epidural. There are a number of studies that show a mother's use of opium throughout the pregnancy experience as having developmental toxicities on the child. And so this is a medicine that is regularly used in the hospital, as well as birthed children are often given morphine if they're in the NICU to stabilize their heart rate. So morphine is regularly used not just in the pregnancy, the labor, but also with newborn babies. A plant we do not need to be afraid of, and regularly used in obstetrics. Belladonna, right? Belladonna is another entheogenic plant, a hallucinatory plant. It is synthesized to produce what's called scopolamine. And scopolamine and morphine were mixed together to induce what was called the twilight sleep. It was a very devious way of giving birth. And this was very common in the early 20th century. And what it would produce in the birth scene were women that were strapped to beds with their hands and feet wrapped in a lamb's wool so that the straps of leather wouldn't show their struggle to break free. Fathers were left in the waiting room for hours, even days, with no real understanding for what was happening behind that closed door. But what a lot of women experienced was a mass psychosis and a great forgetting and a lack of body awareness, which sent a lot of women into shock. They would claw at their face, they would claw at the nurses, sometimes lose children even. And so we lost so many children to this twilight sleep process, a process that went on for 13 years until they finally took a step back. And honestly, this just is simply the transference of thousands of years of birth-keeping knowledge being hijacked by a medical establishment that knew nothing about birth at all. And so it was a lack of awareness and understanding of the intricacies of the birth scene that led to things like twilight sleep. Speaking of midwives and the hijacking of midwifery, we have the third, ergot. So ergotamine actually is a derivative of ergot, which is still used to this day to induce and progress stalled labor. But ergot is a really interesting medicine. It is a fungus that grows on contaminated rye wheat. And in Northern Europe, this contamination was very common and would actually cause mass hysteria. Ergot in high quantities, like LSD, can cause mass psychosis in populations that had no idea that they were being poisoned with what was called ergotism. And there was a mass event of ergotism that broke out throughout Western Europe called St. Anthony's Fire, which sent whole communities into hysteria, which is what we see also in Salem, Massachusetts. But what they didn't understand and know, that midwives were already using ergot in very, very small and calculated doses, would give a mother 3 intact ergot fungus bodies to progress stalled labor. So we see that there is a contractionary effect with ergot and also with LSD. So LSD is counterindicated early in pregnancy because of its ability for uterine contractions, and we still use ergot to this day. And, Albert Hofmann learned a lot from the midwives. It was actually his study into that traditional midwifery system that he found ergot and then synthesized LSD from it. So if mothers have not been in the birth world and in the entheogen world inspiring these scientists, this is a great example of that story. If there is a precedent in obstetrics and traditional midwifery for the proper dosage and harm reduction when working with any plant and fungus that is considered toxic, why then? Why are poisonous plants and fungus with a variety of known toxicities acceptable for use, while the entheogenic earth medicines, which bear very little toxicity, be campaigned against in pregnancy and in postpartum? There are, of course, some safety concerns, and I would like to discuss the LD50. So the LD50 is also a very devious test, but it's how we understand toxicity levels in populations. So the LD50 is done by administering at maximum dosages to a lot of 100 rats, monkeys, and we determine toxicity of this substance by seeing how much it would take in order to kill half, 50. I don't know why they do it this way, but that's okay, because what we get is a lot of great information. What are among the safest entheogens? What can you take in the highest doses, which would not cause harm to you? Mescaline, one of the safest. Far above aspirin or caffeine. Psilocybin shortly after. THC, and then LSD is a bit lower there. So this is where it stands up against these regularly utilized medicines, the morphine that is used in the hospital. How is psilocybin safer than morphine? And yet, psilocybin would never find its way into a hospital room. Well, we're gonna be working on that pretty soon. So when death is considered as a toxic endpoint, psilocybin and the other entheogens are some of the least toxic, regularly used substances in our world. I don't think we can have this conversation. The science is just not there. I know Kyle and I go back and forth about how can we even conduct research to really try to break some of this, break some real ground on this, because although I've created a 50-page guide that's completely free that women can come and look at, a concentrated space with some data and information about this, there is very little else. And actually, I would like to go back for a second, because in that PDF document, I reference one primary piece of research called the psilocin experiment. The only experiment that's ever been done on psilocybin and pregnant women was a study that was done on rats using psilocin, which is an active constituent of psilocybin-producing mushrooms. This is the primarily and most cited reference that any article that a mother will encounter on the internet will refer to. Now, there are a few problems with the way that they conducted this experiment. It's laughable. So they took pregnant mother rats, and first issue was the rate of the mode of administration. They injected into the muscle of pregnant rat mothers pure psilocin. Now, does that in any way represent typical consumption of this mushroom? Hardly, right? So not only was the rate of transmission rather odd, they also bypassed the natural metabolic process of converting psilocybin into psilocin by just giving the mother psilocin, right? So we're getting a stronger hallucinogenic response at a very concentrated mode of administration, and at a dosage that was 3 to 5 times the average dose that is regarded as medically or even spiritually necessary. And I mean, I think that is arranged, as we know from Mother Ayana. You can take as much of this medicine as you would like, but these significant experiences can happen at very low doses. And so even despite these odds, no children were killed. No mothers died. And what they found was that the concentrations of psilocin were highest in the mother, and so that the placental barrier did a wonderful job of filtering through and modulating what was coming into the child's body. So I know we've already seen this mushroom picture a few times. I know Michael James had it in his, but it really reminds me that the human organism has had a long-standing relationship with the sacred mushroom. These mushroom heads are from a little over 3,000 BC. So we're talking 6,000 almost years of human relationship. And not only does it tell us that we had human relationship, but they already at this time were regarding them as sacred. So that tells us that there's even a further history of experimentation and exploration before deifying these mushrooms. And so it shows in the Mesoamerican spiritual systems that there is a reverence for hallucinogens within its pantheon. And I really laugh at the stoned ape hypothesis. I think it's awesome that Terence McKenna was putting together this idea that 30,000 years ago, this great leap in human consciousness was brought by the continual use of our interactions with hallucinogenic plants, namely the psilocybin mushroom. But what I feel like doesn't get talked about often is what is actually the mechanism for evolution? And that's birth, right? We have males are more virile and we want to get down and we're more cooperative and all those things. But the brothers only pass on half the genes, right? So if in fact we are passing on new genetic coding, new mutations, new gene expressions and gene expressions that are really fitting for the world that they are facing in their environment. It's the mothers eating, ingesting, birthing through this experience that not only changes the genetic makeup of the child, but also changes how they're raised. Where that central hearth is being created, what rituals around food, what rituals around storytelling, what rituals of the mothers coming together to share resources and knowledge in child rearing have now been developed with the help of these mushrooms just as much as among the hunters in the village. You can follow the reverence that some cultures have to the important topics in their life by following who they worship and deify. So this is the earth mother of the Azteca, Tlatelolco. She has a giant effigy, a big stone carving in Teotihuacan. And so I really like to bring her, she's an Adutsi or a god. She's also known as Pachamama, Pachamamita, which is a term borrowed by Quechua. Is this who you think you're calling to when you say Pachamama, right? It's like the deeper we go in the history, like the further and more fearful and fierce these entities become. Because through colonization, we get very in the light, right? Even in the skin tone, we get very light. So these are some of the, if we could imagine that these people at this time were seeing her like this in this way, or that some of the symbols on her were actually ways of communicating her status within the community. So first of all, she's a monstrous toadstool, come on, it's obvious. And not only is the toad have a really close relationship with the mushroom, especially the Amanita muscaria mushroom, but also the toad is a symbol. It's an allegory for the transformation of a person, right? They start as a tiny egg, then a fish-like animal, which then turns into a tadpole, which then sprouts legs, which then grows into a larger frog and toad until they come into their fullness as this being that they were supposed to become. What a beautiful allegory for motherhood, for girls as they transform into these different stages and phases of life to take on their beautiful grandmother energy as the great toad woman. So in her mythology, she is the mentor of the shamans and teaches them how to make manioc or yucca beer, coca, and the first hallucinogenic snuffs. So what's really wonderful is, like, in these stories, we've moved beyond consumption of these medicines, but instead the teacher of them. How did we even get them? From the mother. She's the one who taught all of the shamans how to do their work, and we know that she's a mother because look at these breasts. Yo, like, this ain't, you know what this ain't. This is what I look like now, okay? That's a breastfeeding mom right there. And also denoted by the skin rolls, shows that her body has stretched and then come back together. This is a mother for all intents and purposes. And I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to take a look at this video here really quick, because this is Tlatelolco in her fullness. And really important here is what I want to show in this small region. Skull and crossbones. This was the mark of a midwife. Because the doors, ometeo, the doors between life and death, are always back to back. There's actually a special place in the Aztec underworld, the afterlife, if you will, in the West that is specially reserved for mothers and children that die in childbirth. It's called the Mictlan, is the underworld. And so we see not only is she a mother and a teacher of these medicines, but also a midwife. Did I lose the PowerPoint? Sorry, I didn't. Perfect, thank you. No, we're good. So that those markings on her skirt will show her role, not just within the community as a teacher of Entheogens, but a keeper of the gates of the worlds. Peyote has a really special place within pregnancy, and we did talk about the Huichol and the Huirarica peoples. What's really wonderful is that they as we've seen, mescaline is a very safe substance and actually was utilized and leaned into prenatally and during breastfeeding to help prevent miscarriage. Prevention, we're not just talking is it safe, we're talking it's essential at this point to ensure the maturation of the fetus and to increase breast milk production, which I think really runs up on this question, what about breastfeeding? So what I would like to do, what I would like to do very much is to offer a nice little story, and I'm going to take some out of Michael James's, just all the buzzwords right here. Okay.
Did you know
Root
that
chakra
coffee can
drum.
cause
Yeah, we're
insomnia,
just
anxiety, and headaches?
Let this happen.
switched one of
It's
my
fine.
cups of coffee.
Really, really happy for her. Okay. So I'm going to take one out of Michael James's book and guide us on a little storytelling experience. So let's go ahead and close our eyes. Just want to make sure that we can hear this. There we go. Okay. In fact, the story of peyote comes to us by the journey of a mother. The revelation came through a woman's dream. She was lost from her tribe, they say. She had fallen back from a wandering group of hunting men and root-gathering women and had given birth to a child. In some versions of the legend, the child was a boy, in others a girl. Had the band been in its home village, there would have been other women to tend to the mother and child, to sprinkle ashes on the cut navel cord, to bring the mother lukewarm, unsalted corn gruel. Here she was, alone. She cut the navel cord with a stone knife from the pouch at her waist, and then lay helpless under a low, leafy bush, watching the buzzards gather overhead, watching them swooping and soaring lower with each downward beat of their great black wings. Out of this desolation and terror, the woman heard a voice speak to her. Eat the plant growing beside you, it said. That is life and blessing for you and all your people. Weakly, the woman turned her head against the earth, and the only plant in sight beside the bush that sheltered her was a small cactus. It had no thorns, and its head was divided into lobes. She reached for the plant, and it seemed to grow outward to meet her fingers. The woman pulled up the cactus, root and all, and ate the head. Strength returned to the woman immediately. She sat and looked around her. It was dawn. The sun was about to rise. She raised her child to her filling breasts and fed. Then, gathering as many cactus plants as she could find and carry, she rose and walked forward. Something wonderful must have been leading her, for by evening she reached the main group of her people again. The woman took the plants to her uncle, her mother's brother. He was a man of great wisdom and was much respected by his people. This is truly a blessing, the uncle said when he heard the woman's story. We must give it to all the people. This is the story of Peyote Woman. You can open your eyes again. If we understand the role of mythology within the cosmology of ancient peoples, we can see clearly that it's actually through this mother that we even have the great sacrament that is so highly praised within the peyote traditions of the Wirarika. I'd like to talk about ayahuasca for a moment, mostly in that some of these traditions do have their precautionary measures, and ayahuasca is one of them. It is told by one of these grandmothers in this journal called Singing to the Plants, Teachings of Ayahuasca, that Dona Maria said that to drink ayahuasca while lactating, it should not be given in the breast milk. But a woman can drink ayahuasca when she is pregnant because the ayahuasca gives into the child fuerza, or power. The same belief is found among the Shuar. Some women express the belief that a child is born stronger if it receives the beneficial effects of ayahuasca while still in the womb. But we do have, like I said, some precautions. It's in the breast milk, and there is a pattern here that I'm noticing. Among the medicines that are purgative, what about breastfeeding? Now, the contents of breast milk are processed and carried in the blood first. The body synthesizes this medicine through our liver and kidneys. It is then excreted through the urinary tract, and a trace is left over. This blood is then read by the body, sent into the mammary glands, processed as human breast milk, and then given to our child. We're talking 3 filtration systems: the liver, the blood, and then the breast milk. This is the intelligence of the human body. I always recommend the sisters that I do speak to, if they are feeling very precautious, to not pump and dump. This is the body's primary mode of expressing love to our children, and also the greatest means of nutrition for them. This is liquid gold. In some of the ceremonies that I sit in, my breasts were getting very much engorged because I was a whole night away from my son. So I would hand express into a small bowl and offer the breast milk in the ceremony to people to wipe on their face and hands, and sometimes even taste if they haven't had the experience of being breastfed. I've given my breast milk to friends that have missed out on this experience because a great organization thought that formula would somehow be better than a woman's own body to feed their children. It's liquid gold. I advise to just drink it yourself. I've had an experience drinking ayahuasca and then hand expressing and then drinking that milk and receiving more ayahuasca. It very much prolonged my experience, and I definitely see why there's a little bit of a hesitation with using ayahuasca breastfeeding, because it very much shows up in the breast milk. So ayahuasca in combo breastfeeding is ill-advised, particularly for the younger ages, 6 months and below. I find that it's because of their purgative properties, that we have toxins leaving the body, especially with combo. And so for older children, they are just told to wait 6 hours before breastfeeding after a combo sit. But it's interesting because these restrictions are not found for psilocybin and mescaline. So we have years of tradition working with these medicines where some of these precautions are coming up around combo and ayahuasca, but in all intents and purposes, I do not find them for psilocybin and mescaline, which shows me that of these medicines, mescaline and psilocybin are designed to assist mothers. This is a very pivotal moment. We know why these medicines are showing up now. Oh, it's behind me? Thanks. Okay. I feel like anyone could hear me anyway, but we know why these medicines have shown up in the West: to assist in the evolutionary process and for us to use them in the right way. We have to remember, though, that the evolution of life and its mechanism for evolution is birth, is this place. And I'm not here to spout out dosages. It's each their own and their own journey and experience. But what we really want to remember, these medicines have always belonged to mothers. These medicines have always belonged in the birth space. And it is with great pain in my heart that I don't see any children in this space, that we felt like maybe they weren't invited or it wasn't for them, when harm reduction, as I've come to know it, is always with my 2-year-old by my side in the middle of ceremony, that is the safest place for him to be. And we're moving into this really cute story about microdosing moms being super trendy and interesting. I've been, interviewed for Insider Magazine, and Harper Bazaar is now going to feature me in an article as well. But we really need to push the needle further. This is not just about sub-perceptual doses. Take your kids to the fucking park. We're so beyond that. We're beyond that now. We need to not only talk about mothers' higher doses with their children being involved in this process, being in the room and learning these sacred ways. The peyote meetings would have had the entire family. It's a way for the whole community to get together and heal with one another. And we can't change. We can't change the way that this earth moves unless we change the way that we parent children. Thank you. bibliography for the 50-page research article that I put together. This is me and my beautiful son, Martin. His name is Martin. Yes, ma'am. And you can also find that, just take your phone, scan that link, it'll take you to the link tree. The first link is that Entheogenic Earth Medicine Assisted Motherhood Guide, and it has a bibliography in there, so just go ahead and find it there. Thank you so much.